I used to work the night shift at a small hotel, and this happened about a year ago, but it still creeps into my mind all the time. Even now, thinking about it makes my stomach turn. What scares me the most is that I still don't know what that man's intention was or what he was planning to do. The fact that he stayed there for so long and that I didn't even realize he wasn't supposed to be there makes the memory even worse. The hotel itself was small, only 3 floors with around 40 rooms total. It was never busy, especially on weeknights. Most nights, maybe 10 or 15 rooms were occupied at most. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and it was usually quiet and uneventful, which I honestly preferred. I spent most of my time sitting behind the front desk doing paperwork, occasionally checking the security cameras or watching YouTube on my phone when nothing was happening. The lobby wasn't very large. There was the front desk, a small seating area with a couple of couches and a TV, and a few vending machines in the corner. Behind the desk was a small office with a computer, a chair, and a glass window that allowed me to see the lobby while I sat inside. At night, the front doors locked automatically, so guests had to buzz in, and I would press a button to let them inside. Most nights after midnight, nothing happened besides the occasional late arriving guest. But one night, around 11 p.m., a man buzzed the door, and everything about that encounter still makes my stomach drop. I let him in. He looked to be in his mid-40s, tall and thin, but not frail. He was wearing jeans, a baseball cap, and carrying a backpack. He walked up to the desk and asked if we had a room available for the night. I told him we did and gave him the price. He nodded, pulled out a card, and I swiped it. The payment went through without any issue, so I handed him a key card for room 214 on the second floor. As I gave him the key, he looked at me and held eye contact just a little too long. His expression was blank, unreadable. His eyes stayed fixed on me for 3 or 4 seconds after I finished speaking. Then, without saying anything, he turned and walked toward the elevator. Nothing about him was immediately threatening, but something about the interaction stuck with me. It was subtle, just enough to make me notice him. I went back to sitting behind the front desk and scrolling on my phone. Around midnight, I looked up and noticed he was back in the lobby. He didn't come to the desk. Instead, he walked past me and sat down on one of the lounge areas. The TV wasn't on, but he sat there facing it anyway. I assumed maybe he couldn't sleep. Guests sometimes hung out in the lobby late at night, so I didn't think too much of it at first. But after about 30 minutes, I realized something was off. He was still sitting there, completely motionless. He wasn't on his phone, he wasn't reading, he wasn't even dozing. He was just staring straight ahead at the blank TV screen. At one point, I got up to grab a bottle of water from the vending machine. As I walked across the lobby, I felt it, that unmistakable sensation of being watched. I didn't look at him directly, but I could feel his eyes following me the entire time, tracking my movement until I was back behind the desk. The unease that settled over me was immediate and intense. Around 1 a.m., out of boredom, I logged into the reservation system on the computer. I pulled up the list of occupied rooms, and that's when something didn't make sense. Room 214 was listed as vacant. I muttered, "What the hell?" under my breath, and checked again because I clearly remembered checking him in less than an hour earlier. At first, I thought maybe I had made some kind of mistake. I pulled up the check-in logs, but there was nothing there. No name, no room assignment, no record of him at all. Then I opened the transaction screen to confirm that his card had gone through earlier. There were no payments listed, nothing. I remember feeling completely confused. I was certain I had swiped his card and heard the confirmation beep, but the system showed absolutely no trace of it. That's when I picked up the phone and called room 214. It rang about 10 times with no answer. After that, I checked the keycard entry log, which shows when a room door has been opened. There was nothing there either, no entry at all. That was the moment it hit me. He never went to the room after I gave him the keycard. I slowly looked over at the lounge area, and there he was, still sitting on the couch, staring at the TV that wasn't even turned on. A horrible, heavy feeling settled in my chest. I sat there for a while, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to believe the system had just glitched, but the lack of a room entry and the missing charge made the obvious he wasn't checked in. I waited another 15 minutes, just watching him. Around 1:30 a.m., I finally walked over and asked if everything was okay. He turned his head toward me, his face completely blank, and said he just couldn't sleep. Then he turned back toward the TV, like the conversation was over. I nodded and returned behind the desk, but my hands were shaking. Around 2 a.m., I looked up and realized he wasn't sitting in the lounge anymore. My stomach dropped immediately. I scanned the lobby, and then I saw him, standing at the far end of the hallway near the bathrooms, half hidden in the darkness. He wasn't moving, he was just standing there. I kept glancing up at him while pretending to focus on the computer. After a while, he slowly walked back and sat down in the lounge again, like nothing had happened. That's when I called my manager at home and explained the situation. She sounded exhausted and told me to keep an eye on him and call the police if he did anything threatening. I remember hanging up and thinking it already felt threatening, but I didn't know what else to do. I started checking the security cameras more closely. On the first floor hallway camera, I saw him walk all the way down the hall, stop at the end, and stand there for several minutes before turning around and walking back. Later, he went into the stairwell and stayed there for about 10 minutes. I have no idea what he was doing in there. Every time I looked up from the computer, he was somewhere else, near the vending machines, by the elevators, or standing in a corner of the lobby where the lighting was dim. And every time, he was staring. By 3:30 a.m., I couldn't handle it anymore, so I called the non-emergency police line and explained that there was a man in the hotel who I didn't believe was a guest. They said they would send someone. While I was waiting, he moved again, this time closer to the desk. He stopped about 15 feet away and just watched me. He barely blinked. He didn't speak. He just stared, like something was wrong with him. I pretended to type on the computer, but I was so scared I could barely breathe. Around 3:50 a.m., the buzzer went off. For a second, I thought the police had arrived, but it was just another guest returning late. I let him in quickly, and I noticed the man turn his head and follow the guest with his eyes as he walked across the lobby. That scared me even more. It felt like he was studying him. A few minutes later, the man disappeared again. I checked the cameras and saw him standing outside a guest room door on the first floor, just standing there. That's when I called 911. I told them he was outside a guest's room and I didn't know what he was trying to do. They said officers were on the way. I watched the camera feed without blinking. He stood at that door for about 3 minutes, then slowly walked back toward the lobby. When he returned, he came straight up to the desk and leaned over the counter. He looked at me and asked if there was any food. His voice was low and unsettling. I told him there were vending machines in the corner. He gave a small smile and walked away. I sat there staring at the clock, silently begging the police to arrive. Finally, around 4:10 a.m., 2 officers showed up. I let them in and immediately pointed toward him. He was back in the lounge, sitting down again. They walked over and spoke to him for a few minutes, asking for his ID and questions I couldn't hear. Then they escorted him out of the building. One of the officers came back and explained that the man was not a guest at all. The credit card he gave me was stolen. He had no luggage and no reservation. He had only pretended to check in so he could gain access to the hotel. They charged him with trespassing and possession of a stolen card. After they left, I sat there shaking until my shift finally ended. Every time I checked the cameras, I expected to see him again. The part that disturbed me the most was realizing he had spent hours inside the hotel, wandering the halls, standing outside guest rooms, and watching me from different corners. And the scariest part of all was knowing he was never supposed to be there. I still have no idea what his plan was, but I know for sure it wasn't anything good. That was the scariest night of my life. My name is Meredith. I'm 24 years old, and at the time, I worked the night shift at a tiny gas station just off County Road 11. It's the kind of place people don't really notice unless they're out of gas or completely lost. I took the job because it was quiet and predictable, or at least I thought it was. I used to like that. It started on a Thursday night around 1 a.m. The air outside was damp and heavy, and the constant hum of the overhead lights had been irritating me all shift. I was standing behind the counter, about to microwave a cinnamon roll I didn't even really want, when the door chimed. A man walked in. He looked to be in his mid-40s, maybe older. He wore a green coat, his hair was messy, and his lips were cracked, like he hadn't smiled in years. Instead of heading toward the coffee or the snack aisle like most customers, he stopped near the counter and just stared at me, with a strange sense of familiarity. "Hi," I said, forcing a polite smile. "You always work this late." I blinked. Yeah, mostly." He smiled slightly. "I figured. I've passed through a few times, noticed it's always you." That unsettled me more than I let on. "Oh, yeah, small town." He didn't leave. "Meredith, right?" I froze. I wasn't wearing a name tag. I was about to ask how he knew my name when he continued, casually explaining that I had nice handwriting. He pointed toward the whiteboard where I'd written "Cinnamon coffee is back." He said most people dot their I's with circles, but I use little slashes. He called it specific, thoughtful. I didn't respond. He didn't buy anything. He just stood there another minute, watching me like he was studying my reactions. Then he nodded. "I'm Paul," he said. "Just curious, that's all." And then he walked back out into the fog. After that, he started showing up again. Not every night, not often enough to say the word stalker out loud, but enough that I stopped believing it was coincidence. Sometimes he came inside. Sometimes he just sat in his car at the edge of the parking lot with the headlights off. One night, he came in and bought a bottle of water. He lingered like always. "You're quieter tonight," he said. "Long shift," I muttered. He slowly scanned the store like he was mentally cataloging everything. "It must get lonely," he said. "Just you out here in the dark, no one else for miles?" "I'm fine," I replied. He leaned against the counter. "You ever get scared being a woman alone at night?" His tone wasn't threatening. That's what made it worse. He sounded curious, neutral, like he was asking about the weather. I stepped back. "Do you need anything else?" He tilted his head. "You always keep the back room door locked. Smart. I've noticed you check it around 2 a.m. almost every night." My stomach twisted. "I'll let you get back to it," he said softly, almost apologetic. "Didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." Then he left. After that, everything changed. I walked to my car with my keys between my fingers. I kept a tire iron under the counter. I changed the curtains in my apartment. I started locking the bathroom door when I showered, even when I was home alone. There were nights he didn't come at all. Sometimes a whole week would pass. Somehow that made it worse. One night, I came back from a 10-minute break and found a Polaroid photo sitting on the counter. It was me refilling the windshield washer bin behind the station. The photo was taken that same night from way too close. There was no note, but the words "I" and "windshield" on the bin label had been circled in red ink. The slash dots on the eyes were unmistakable. The next time he came in, I told him to leave. I told him I'd call the police if he didn't. Paul nodded calmly. "I get it. I've been too forward." "I've been following me," I said, my voice cracking. "I just think you're someone who's used to being misunderstood. I thought you'd appreciate someone who pays attention." "That's not paying attention, that's obsession." He didn't flinch. "Would it be easier if I smiled more, bought a soda every night? Would that make me normal?" he asked. "If I pretended not to notice your shoes are always half a size too big, or how your left eyelid twitches when you're tired?" I was already dialing 911. He didn't try to stop me. The police arrived quickly. He didn't resist. He just stood there, arms at his sides, waiting. They searched his car and found a notebook filled with dates, times, and notes. My schedule, my clothes, my groceries. One page had my name written over and over, tighter and tighter, until it dissolved into scribbles. He kept telling the officers the same thing. "I just noticed things. I'm just curious." The restraining order was approved that week. I quit working nights, I moved. The company transferred me to another station 2 hours away. Even now, if headlights stay behind me too long while I'm driving, I feel a chill crawl up my spine. And sometimes I still think about the way he said my name, like he'd already practiced it. At the time I'm writing this, what I'm about to describe happened just last night. I'm a 22-year-old woman working the overnight shift at a 24-hour gas station. I've been there just under 2 months. I work weekends, Thursday through Saturday, while my coworker Max covers weekdays. Around 2:30 a.m., Max and his friend Ben stopped by for coffee. They were laughing and clearly high. They'd taken mushrooms earlier, and honestly, it was entertaining. While we talked, Ben mentioned a car parked in the lot with its lights off but engine running. He said it had been there before they arrived. When he asked the driver about it, the man claimed he was waiting on a DoorDash order. That wasn't unusual, but I hadn't received an order in almost 2 hours. I'd spent most of the night cleaning in the back, away from the windows. We brushed it off. The guys went outside to smoke and play with Max's dog. An hour later, they came back in. Max told me the car had been parked in a blind spot, completely hidden from the register view. The man sat there the entire time, switching between watching them and checking his phone. Ben, high as hell, walked up and asked why he was staring. The man pretended not to speak English. When that didn't work, he suddenly switched to English, claimed he had the wrong address, and sped off. What made it worse was the car had no license plates. It looked brand new. There were blankets piled in the back, enough to hide someone. As the first car left, another car with no plates pulled in, lights off, then immediately followed it out. Max stayed another 15 minutes, warned me to be careful, and left. Around 6 a.m., he came back, sober this time, just to check on me. Even he admitted the whole thing had scared him. We both agreed that if they hadn't been there, the night could have ended very differently. I still don't know whether it was pure coincidence or if those two cars were actually waiting for the moment Max and Ben left and I was completely alone. I do carry a knife on me for protection, but deep down, my gut tells me that if there were multiple people involved, it probably wouldn't have mattered. If those guys hadn't been out there laughing, playing with a dog like kids in the parking lot, I honestly think something terrible could have happened to me. I worked again the following night, and I told myself I'd update if anything happened. I really wish I didn't have an update. The car came back. It was around 3 a.m., and I was mopping the floors when 4 guys came in to grab coffee and snacks. I was ringing them up when one of them casually asked if I knew anything about the car parked at the far end of the lot, the one running with its lights off. I asked him what car. He told me it looked like a brand new Subaru with no license plates. The engine was running, and from where they were parked, it looked like there were 2 guys in the front seats arguing. The moment he said that, my heart dropped into my stomach. I told them that a car matching that exact description had been sitting in the parking lot the night before. That time, there had only been 1 guy inside. One of the men, who seemed to be the leader of the group, told me that when they pulled in for gas, the car was already there. It stayed parked the entire time they filled up their truck. He said that as they walked toward the store, they passed the car close because they were parked at the pump farthest from the doors. As they passed, they could hear one of the guys inside talking loudly, not quite yelling, but close and pointing toward the entrance of the store. One of them started to walk over, intending to ask if everything was okay. That's when the guys in the car noticed them. The Subaru immediately went into reverse and sped out of the parking lot. I told them I was almost certain it was the same car from the night before, the one that acted strange whenever there were people around, and then panicked and left as soon as it was confronted with another car following it out. They all looked genuinely concerned. One of them offered to stay with me for a bit, just in case the car came back. I asked if they were sure, and when they said it was no problem, they hung around for about 20 minutes. Eventually, we all agreed that I was probably in the clear. I thanked them and let them top off their coffee for free before they headed out, leaving me alone again. Nothing else happened for the rest of my shift, but I stayed hyper-aware, especially when I had to go outside later to change the trash at the gas pumps. What scares me the most is that I never actually saw the car myself. Multiple people warned me about it. At first, I tried to convince myself I was just being paranoid, but the same car, 2 nights in a row at almost the exact same time, parking in a spot deliberately hidden from the register and front windows, that doesn't feel random. If my paranoia was justified, then I'm incredibly grateful that another group of people happened to show up when they did. If those guys in the car had decided to come inside while I was alone, I don't know how that night would have ended. Thankfully, I don't work for the next few days. I can only hope that when I do go back, that car doesn't show up again. My name is Daniel. I'm 29 years old, and I work the overnight shift at a small rural motel. It's not part of a chain, just a family-owned place with 2 floors and maybe 25 rooms total. My shift runs from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The motel doesn't get much traffic at night. Sometimes we'll have a couple of late check-ins if someone's passing through, but most nights are dead quiet. That's exactly why I took the job. I'm not much of a people person, and sitting alone in a mostly empty building works for me. The layout is simple. There's a main office with the front desk, a few chairs, a coffee machine, and a small rack of brochures. Behind the desk is a hallway that leads to a back office. That room feels more like a lounge. It has another desk, a couch, a mini fridge, and a TV mounted on the wall. There's also a small speaker back there that makes a loud ding whenever someone rings the bell at the front desk. Because of that, I usually stay in the back, watching something on my laptop or even napping on the couch. When I hear the bell, I just get up and walk to the front. I've worked there long enough to know the normal sounds. The building creaks, the heater clicks on and off, the front door buzzes when a guest uses their key card after hours. Those sounds are familiar. But the thing about working overnight is that even normal sounds can get under your skin if you think about them too long. And sometimes things that seem normal at first aren't. This happened on a Tuesday night in the fall. It was cold, probably in the low 40s, and the parking lot was mostly empty except for 4 or 5 cars belonging to guests. Around 2 a.m., I heard the front desk bell. I got up from the couch and walked into the main office. No one was there. The lobby was empty. I looked through the glass doors toward the parking lot, but the road beyond was dark and completely still. No headlights, no cars pulling in. At first, I wondered if I'd imagined it, but the bell is loud. I knew I hadn't. I waited at the desk for a minute, expecting someone to walk in late. No one did. So I went back to the lounge, sat down, and started scrolling on my phone. Less than 10 minutes later, the bell rang again. This time, I jumped up and went straight to the front. Once again, the office was empty. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I walked to the doors and stepped outside. The parking lot looked exactly the same as before. Cars parked, lights off, no movement. The road was empty too. And that's when I knew something wasn't right. I walked to the edge of the sidewalk and looked both ways, but there wasn't a single sign of life anywhere. No cars, no movement, nothing. I went back inside and decided to sit behind the front desk instead of returning to the back office. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, maybe a drunk person messing around or some kind of ding-dong ditch, maybe even a guest's kid thinking it was funny. After sitting there for about 15 minutes with nothing happening, I started to relax again. I leaned back in the chair, opened my laptop, and figured it was just one of those strange moments I'd laugh about later. Then, the bell rang again. I snapped my head up so fast it actually hurt. The lobby was empty. There was no one in sight. My skin began to crawl. I stood up and walked around the front desk, checking to make sure no one was hiding nearby. Nothing. I checked the lobby bathrooms. Still nothing. I stepped outside again and scanned the lot, even walking a short distance while shining my phone flashlight around. It was completely silent. When I went back inside, I made a decision. Instead of going back to the lounge, I sat down in the chair directly behind the front desk. If someone was sneaking around and ringing the bell just to mess with me, I wanted to be there when they tried it again. I dimmed the lobby lights slightly so the room sat in shadow and then just listened. The quiet was oppressive. Every tiny sound made me tense. The ticking of the wall clock sounded unnaturally loud. The fridge in the back office clicked on and hummed. Every few minutes, the building creaked as it settled. I sat there with my arms crossed, staring at the bell on the counter. 15 minutes passed, then 20. My eyes started to feel heavy, and I began to wonder if I'd imagined the whole thing. Just as I let myself relax, just as I started to drift, the bell rang. This time, I saw it happen. A pale hand slowly rose up from beneath the front desk, reached over the counter, and calmly pressed the bell right in front of me. I jumped up so fast the chair nearly toppled over. I bolted down the hallway into the back office, slammed the door shut, and locked it. I stood there in the darkness, my chest pounding so hard it felt like it might break through my ribs. My mind raced, trying to understand how someone could even fit under there. There isn't much space beneath the desk, but it's just enough for someone to crouch if they really squeezed, which meant he'd been hiding just a few feet away from me the entire time. I forced myself to look at the security monitors. There were 4 camera feeds, one for the lobby, one for the hallway, and 2 for the parking lot. On the lobby feed, I saw the chair knocked over from when I ran. The counter looked empty at first. Then, in the bottom corner of the screen, something moved. A head slowly emerged from behind the desk. I couldn't make out details, just the outline and the faint glint of eyes staring straight into the camera. I backed away from the monitor. I couldn't look at it anymore.